To Global View. Today we have the absolute pleasure of hosting a very special guest in a very specific situation we'll discuss later, her Avital Leibovich, former spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces and currently director of the American Jewish Committee in Israel. With years of experience at the intersection of military operations, media, and international public diplomacy, she has been a key voice explaining Israel's security challenges to global audiences. Mrs. Leibovich, welcome to Global View, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
You are right now in Israel, and you are facing an emergency situation. Can you explain our audience what you're experiencing right now?
With pleasure. So there is an emergency situation declared in the country. And what this means is actually, and of course, this was approved by the government. And this means that since there is a joint operation, an Israeli and American joint operation in Iran, and Israel is being attacked in the last month with more than 400 ballistic missiles from Iran, this has a few requirements for the population. Number one, there are no schools whatsoever, not universities, not kindergartens, not elementary schools, not high schools, nothing. The whole education system is closed. Why? Because imagine a school of 1,000 people. You can't have a big enough shelter to have all the kids go there in case of a ballistic missile attack. And therefore, the people in Israel are required to stay near shelters for the past 1 month or so. In workplaces which can host up to 50 people, and there is a shelter with a relevant timing because there are certain minutes that you need to go to the shelter, that's okay then. There's a possibility to do that. But most of the people that have young kids, and Israel is a young country with a young population, most of the people just stay home because the kids are at home. So they can't just leave to work. Restaurants are closed mostly. All the malls and, cultural centers are, of course, empty. Small businesses are closed because a lot of people have been recruited to reserves. In Israel, we have mandatory service in the army, and when you finish your mandatory service, whether you're a boy or a girl, you go to the reserves unit. And so we have a lot of men and women which are reservists all over the country because of this emergency situation. And if I'm a reservist and I have, let's say, a gym, obviously I cannot open the gym. And as you can imagine, the airport is partially closed. The airspace here has to close because of the risks here. So this is what really means to be an emergency situation. Each civilian, by the way, has on his or her mobile phone, a certain system that actually gives an alert whenever a ballistic missile is fired from Iran to Israel. So everybody walks around and they have the capability at every given point in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, wherever they are in the country, they receive an alert so they can immediately go to the nearby shelter.
Can you explain, because there's been a lot of disinformation or misinformation about what this conflict is all about. Can you explain why Israel views this as an existential threat to not only its own existence, but to global peace and security?
Of course. Unfortunately, for the past 47 years, there has been an Ayatollah regime in Iran, which actually took the country upside down from the Shah times until 1979. By the way, until 1979, there were direct flights from Tel Aviv to Tehran. There were Israelis there. There was an Israeli embassy there. There were business people doing business. There were a lot of Jews, a flourishing Jewish community. But when the Ayatollahs oust the regime of the Shah, then we found a different situation, a situation that sacrifices the weapons and the development of the weapons, the sort of revolutionary guard system which controls the money because Iran is a very rich country. It has different natural resources. And the people there today cannot even have fresh water. They open their faucets in their homes, there is no water, running water. Because the money is all going to the Ayatollahs, to the Revolutionary Guards, and to this huge security apparatus which they have built for so many decades that did and invested in one main thing: nuclear capabilities. Now, when you build nuclear capabilities, it's not just one factory that, you produce everything there. The nuclear bomb has 1,000,000 components. So imagine such a huge country like Iran with huge desertous areas, 92 million people. The bombs has a lot of components. So one component is manufactured in a factory somewhere in Western Iran. Another one is in Tehran. A third one is in Isfahan. A fourth one is another place. And that's what it means when they invested so many years in building these capabilities, bringing scientists from, by the way, also other countries as well. Now, who is the enemy? Who is the enemy of Iran? Israel is 2,000 kilometers away. For an Israeli jet to fly from here to Iran, it's almost 2 hours. It's not on our border. We don't have anything with Iran, and I explained the good relations we had before that. It all comes down to a deadly ideology, which all of us have been hearing for 24/7 for the last 47 years. Death to America and death to Israel. And I'm sure you've seen numerous times burning of the American flag, burning the Israeli flag, even in the parliament, in the Majlis. They step on the flags at the entrance, so everybody that walks in has no choice but to step on the flag. Now, Israel obviously cannot live with such an existential threat. When a country says, I'm developing a nuclear weapon, you should be annihilated, then you make 1 + 1 and you understand you need to defend yourself. Now, it's not a situation that, they do academic researches on. They actually developed the capacity. Now, there's also another danger. It's not existential, but it does imply to other parts of the world, and that is the ballistic missiles. The fact that the Iranians fired a few days ago ballistic missiles to Diego Garcia, this is 4,000 kilometers range. Now, if Israel is only 2,000 kilometers, why do they need to develop a missile that reaches 4,000 kilometers? So the answer is very simple. Most of the European countries are within 4,000 kilometers. So it's a global threat. It's not only an Israeli threat. And the final threat, I would say, again, it's not existential, but it's part of the strategy that allows us to understand the Iranian mindset, is trying to surround Israel with proxies. So in Syria, when Bashar Assad was the president, obviously the Iranians had facilities, military facilities on the ground in Syria. Revolutionary Guards trained the Syrian army. They tried to build air bases, intelligence facilities, and so on. Moving to Lebanon, in the 80s, Hezbollah was founded, funded, directed by Iran. These are 100,000 people. These are people that have top arms. And imagine for every single week an aircraft landing in Beirut International Airport with loads and loads of ammunition, and there's no inspection. So Lebanon has been hijacked by Hezbollah, which was placed by Iran to attack Israel. Because at the end of the day, they created this crescent which from all directions towards Israel is attacking Israel. So the main threat for Israel is the nuclear threat. And that's the reason why Israel, alongside the US, in an amazing strategic alliance, cooperation, shoulder to shoulder, are fighting this existential threat. And because, if Iran will have a nuclear weapon, obviously it could use it all over the world. But it's not only that. Imagine what would happen here in the region, in the Middle East, and what kind of arms race this will lead to. So that's the main reason.
Thank you for this very comprehensive explanation. Many Americans, including in the MAGA movement, still struggles to understand these nuclear threats when we think about the distances, right? It's considered an issue that stands far away from them. They don't want to get involved with handless wars. I'm playing devil's advocate in this case. But how explain, what are we missing in the communication to explain how much of a threat Iran is to the United States and how much of an alliance is defined not simply by supporting Israel, but supporting our national interest?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we have today, especially with social media, is ignorance, because the pace of information is so quick that people just don't have the patience anymore to read. And you know how you have a post with 3 dots? People don't even press, the 3 dots to read more. Because today it's all about a picture or a clip of 20 seconds with a caption, and that's it. You make up your mind with a picture and a caption on a conflict of 47 years. And so people don't really, deepen their knowledge. Now, you just go back into history, which I know people don't like to do, and see how much American blood has been spilled by Iran, whether it was with the Marines in Lebanon in 83, whether it was in Iraq, whether it was in Saudi, whether it was in other areas. There are many hundreds of Americans who were killed because of Iran. But even for us, the US is not on our border. Iran is not on our border. Just like the US, Iran is not on the US's border, but also for us, it's not on our border. It's very far away, 2,000 kilometers. But still, the threat, the long arms of Iran are in many, many countries today in the world. That's why it's so important to sanction, especially the financial part, because if you don't pay your security apparatus, then the whole thing collapses. So I definitely see a shared value here, both for the US and for Israel. And look, political arguments will always take place. We need to stick to facts. I'm a great believer in sticking to facts. Let's see where they were 47 years ago in their nuclear plan and where they are today. And they didn't just sit on the beach for 47 years doing nothing.
Sure.
Avital, you mentioned a very important issue about nuclear proliferation in the Middle East in case Iran gets a nuclear weapon. Now, there's only one predominantly Muslim state that has nukes, and that's Pakistan. There's also another predominantly Muslim state, along with Iran, that is directly threatening Israel, and that's Turkey. Now, why did I mention nuclear weapons, Pakistan, and Turkey? Because Turkey and Pakistan have a strategic relationship. If there's a nuclear proliferation, obviously Turkey will want a nuclear weapon along with Saudi Arabia. And now with the situation also in Gaza, where Turkey wants to put its own boots on the ground there and get a nuclear weapon while threatening Israel, do you consider Iran and Turkey Israel's largest threats, or is Turkey a more manageable issue for Israel compared to Iran?
So I would not put them both in the same category. Iran, there's no doubt, it's Israel's number one threat. Also the region, because listen, Iran is attacking 12 countries. Yes. Israel is just one of them. And if you make a quick calculation, just in numbers, how many rockets, ballistic missiles, and explosive drones they had fired to Israel versus the other 11 countries, then 17% is towards Israel, and 83% Iran has invested in attacking the other 11 countries. So Israel doesn't even enjoy, yes, I'm putting it sarcastically, the majority of the missiles. Now look, Turkey until 2010, I remember it very clearly, until 2010, we had strategic relations with Turkey. And that meant even exercising together. I'll tell you more than that. An Israeli IDF general, Israeli Defense Forces general, was calling his Turkish counterparts a few times a week until 2010. These were very close relations because at the end of the day, we had a lot of cooperation, whether it was Navy, military exercises, trade, which has a lot of potential, of course. tourism. It's 1 hour flight from here, and Israelis love to go to the resorts in Turkey at the time. But in 2010, and I was there that day, we found ourselves with a flotilla of 6 vessels called, everybody refers to it as the Mavi Marmara. But one vessel was named Mavi Marmara, and the rest were other vessels. The problem was that there is a Turkish terror group called IHH, and they actually tried to infiltrate into Israeli maritime. And Israel did not allow it. Turkey let them do whatever they want. And that was the last day of these strategic relations. We are talking about 16 years ago. The relations never resumed to what they were. I can tell you, because Turkey is positioned in such a strategic location, plus it's a NATO member country, Israel has an embassy in Turkey. Turkey has an embassy in Tel Aviv. There are still trade relations between the two countries. And we understand that we have a problematic leader in Turkey who from time to time speaks out in a fashion that is interpreted as anti-Semite. For example, a few weeks ago, he called out to go and conquer Jerusalem. And this is not something that leaders of, Western countries do. So understanding that with this current leadership, we cannot strengthen the relations between us and Turkey. So it's on a very low key, but it's not a military threat, just like Iran is.
Yes, and you mentioned Iran is a huge country where the placement of nuclear production can be hidden anywhere in the soil. So from the military point of view, which is the best and the most effective strategy at this point? We have seen striking, we have seen, of course, deployment of sophisticated armory, both on the United States and the Israel side, but how far we have to go to really achieve the result of neutralize these threats?
So I want to give you a little bit of an insight on the joint American-Israeli planning. Mm-hmm. Because obviously when you have so many thousands of targets which are targeted by the two of the best air forces in the world every single day, you need to plan. So we saw something remarkable. We saw Israeli teams and American teams sitting together and planning one by one. Now, think of it. It's a huge airspace. You need to divide it. You need to divide the targets between the two militaries. And that's what Israel has been doing before the operation began. And, but we're also saving lives together. When a ballistic missile is fired from Iran towards Israel, the American officer and the Israeli officer are sitting together in the same base, in the Israeli Air Force base, and they are making a decision which system will intercept that missile. Will it be the American system? Will it be the Israeli system? Will it be both? So I think it's very important for the American people to know that America is helping us to save our lives. And we're doing it together, side by side, hand by hand. And I don't see any other military getting so close like we have done here. Now, as for the targets themselves, there are a few types of targets. Of course, none of them are civilian. The idea is, we have nothing against the civilians, of course, and our heart goes out to them. So the military targets, there are 3 security bodies in Iran. The first one is the Revolutionary Guards. This is estimated in something like 1 million people. But let's say the commanders is about 150,000. They have a lot of bases all over the country. That's one type of military target. The second one is the Basij. Remember in the protest, those men wearing black, carrying different kinds of weapons and trying to kill the protesters, and we saw that with the women with the veils a few years ago. These are the Basij. They are the modesty police. They're estimated to be 500,000. So they're also a target. And of course, the Iranian army, which is a lot more weaker, but they are still part of this terror regime, and therefore there's a target. So security targets is one. The other one is the factories, as I mentioned, those production sites, either for ballistic missiles, for drones, for nuclear capacity, and so on. But there are many, many targets because they have built themselves for this moment for 47 years. So if someone thinks that 1 month or 6 weeks will suffice to hit Iran in a significant way that, they will not be able to rebuild themselves, that's not relevant because they have built it for 47 years. And I know people are impatient and we're paying a heavy price. And the American troops, we have 13 soldiers that lost their lives. May they rest in peace in America. But we need time. We need time if we really want to finish this regime, this cruel regime, which, by the way, for them too, for the people of Iran, first and foremost, who are just suffering as well, but also for our security and the American security and the global security.
Avital, a couple of questions. Do you think that the U.S. and Israel overestimated or underestimated Iran's capabilities? And the reason I say this is because initially when this war began, it seemed to be a couple days or 3 days, a week at the most, and then the narrative was that the Iranian people would then overthrow the regime once Khamenei was killed, and the commanders and the people would take to the streets. Up until now, we haven't seen that. So that's the first. I want to know your assessment about that. And the second thing is regarding China's involvement with Iran. It's an issue that many are not really talking about, but China and Iran have an incredibly close strategic and economic cooperation agreement. Over $400 billion worth of Chinese investments are in Iran, developing rail, ports, military, etc. So I wanted to ask you about the overestimation or underestimation about Iran initially versus where you see this going, and then China's role in this conflict.
I don't think anybody underestimates Iran because this is not a guerrilla organization that, woke up one day and decided to be a lion. That's not the case at all. The Iranians are smart people. They have a lot of funding because most of the money from the oil does not go to the people, it goes to them to build different kinds of rockets and missiles. And by the way, of course, they have a lousy Air Force because they have no changing parts because the Air Force was stuck in 1979 because of embargo and sanctions and so on. And also their Navy was not an amazing Navy, okay? But anything else, every other knowledge they could have bought from Russia and from China and from North Korea to develop it into long-range ballistic missiles and different kinds of military assets which you can fire, or drones of different types. I mean, imagine a drone. The drone that flies to Israel flies for 2 hours, okay? This is not something you buy on Amazon for your kids. It flies for 2 hours. These are sophisticated war machines, or death machines, rather. So nobody underestimates Iran. It's very clear. And also there's an issue of culture. The Iranians are very stubborn. They don't care that the people will die. They have no sentiments for their own people. They're willing to fight until the last drop of blood. They're fighting for survival. This is a different mindset than Europe, than Latin America, than North America. They are fighting for survival. And if all of their people need to die for that, so that will be. So that's the question about Iran. China, that's a big issue. I remember looking at some information that before the operation, if you remember, there were a lot of exchange of messages publicly before the operation began. And the US spoke about Iran not coming to the table. By the way, speaking of ignorance, remember that we had the episode in June, the 11-day war in June, which the US participated. The US immediately following that asked Iran to come to the negotiating table. They refused to do so for 7 months until February. And then what happened? There were two meetings in February. One was in Oman, and the second one was in Geneva. Who was the first one to run out to the cameras after those meetings? Arakchi, the foreign minister of Iran. And what did he say? Great talks, all the gaps were closed, we are heading to the right direction. And obviously, there couldn't be a bigger lie because the gaps were huge. So, I mean that at the end of the day, the preparation was done in a very long time in advance. And therefore, when that period took place, China helped Iran. And we saw Chinese aircrafts on the ground, logistic kinds of aircrafts, which brought different kinds of help, assistance to Iran. But in the last week, I have to say, I'm hearing a different music. Even the Chinese, I think it was foreign minister, gave a statement that Iran needs to end the war. So I'm not sure if the relations between the two will resume to what they have been. But regardless of Iran, China wants to have an impact in the region. Take, for example, Djibouti. Chinese have a huge base in Djibouti. There are a few other countries which also have a base there, but basically trying to impact, take Greece, for example, buying ports, building them, for example. Also in Israel, one of the ports was built by Chinese. So they're really trying to make some sort of an impact in the region. With the connection with Iran, it's very dangerous, of course. And this is something that Israel cannot accept. And I know that the US does not accept that as well.
Well, you mentioned something that many people forgot that already in June, we had the first round of strike and then so-called negotiation. Just recently, actually yesterday, President Trump announced that Iran is willing to negotiate again. So might be because China is stepping back, and can we trust a negotiation, negotiating an agreement right now, or we should just go and ahead with the regional plan and then neutralize the threat once for all?
The short answer is no. The long answer, of course not. We cannot trust Iran because you cannot trust them. They're just lying time and time again. By the way, don't believe me. You have the IAEA, which issues reports every couple of months about the condition of the nuclear plants in Iran. The inspectors of the IAEA were not allowed to enter certain sites. As a matter of fact, they didn't even know that these sites existed. So what's the point of signing an agreement 11 years ago with Iran, the JCPOA, when they don't respect it at the end of the day? So no, I don't believe them at all, of course. I'm sure they're eager. That I have no doubt. They're eager to have an agreement, because if 400 missiles flew here in the last month, imagine how many tons of explosives are falling in Iran every single day. So I'm sure they're eager to reach an agreement, but they're also doing it their own way, which means to stall time, to negotiate, because President Trump gave 15 points to the agreement. And Iran, you hear the statements by Iranian officials and the leaks, because they're, of course, briefing different media outlets. They're asking for compensation, for example. What? They're asking for the US to compensate them financially. This is one of their conditions to have some sort of, it sounds crazy, but that's exactly what they are. And the idea is to stall time, of course. So let's see, we are now in the middle of an ultimatum, which President Trump gave the Iranians. We know that we have thousands of Marines which are making their way here to the region. And let's see if that pressure will work. I don't think anything will come out of it, but let's see. We'll know within the next 72 hours.
Mm-hmm. Avital, last question I have. What does an actual cessation of hostilities look like that's acceptable to Israel? Because we've had different things, as I mentioned earlier. One was regime change. The other was a cessation of nuclear enrichment, cessation of ballistic missile production. But now we're talking about negotiations. and President Trump has said that the Iranians have a big offer on the table for us that we might accept, but that doesn't look like regime change. It doesn't. Basically, there's a lot of moving parts in these negotiations, which are very fluid. So, what does an actual acceptable solution look like in this conflict from Israel's perspective to stop the war?
First of all, there are 90 million people in Iran.
Yeah.
And they need to create the opposition that will serve as the new regime. It's not something that Israel needs to do or Israel will do. It's not something for us to do. But we need to mention the enriched uranium, because Iran is holding about approximately 440 kilograms of enriched uranium. And according to Mr. Witkoff, this amount is sufficient to make 10 nuclear bombs. Mm-hmm. And again, 10 nuclear bombs could be launched wherever in the world, including the US, including Israel, including the region, including, China, wherever. So that enriched uranium, according to intelligence information, is currently underground in 3 different locations in Iran. That cannot stay in the hands of Iran. Cannot stay, because that's an immediate danger. That's number one, reaching an agreement. That's number one condition. The second one is not allowing them to enrich you at all, maybe 2% for civilian needs, but with very tight inspection, and I'm not sure on the Iranian ground. The third issue is the ballistic missiles. They cannot produce ballistic missiles. These are the critical things. Of course, the proxies, we'll get rid of them by ourselves. I mean, we're fighting a multi-arena. We're now fighting in Lebanon as well. We'll get rid of Hezbollah at some point. But these are the 3 conditions that really, if we finish the current operation without fulfilling these 3 conditions, I don't see a situation in which the regime will eventually change. And I think we'll be back again in another kind of round in a few months.
Thank you so much for your time and these wonderful insights. Where people can follow you to have a more comprehensive understanding and information rather than 1-second clips.
So I'm usually writing on X. That's the platform I'm using. I'm trying to give interesting information, always reliable, by the way. I will never lie. I will try to give accurate information, data, clips, a little bit of pictures, just to explain what is going on here in my neck of the woods.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I hope, hopefully you will join again soon for an update.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.